disability included in BC workplaces. In observance of the International Persons with Disabilities Day later in the week on December 3rd, today's event is very timely as we learn from our award winners, industry experts, and champions on how they have implemented diversity and inclusion strategies to overcome challenges and to support a diverse workforce. My name is Yat, and I'm your moderator for today. I'm also the Senior Accessibility Consultant at the President's Group and self-identify with a disability. I'm deaf without hearing aids and hard of hearing with hearing aids. We're happy to share that our event today is accessible. We have closed captioning and American Sign Language interpreters. Interpreters Tanya Creed and Tanis Campbell will be spotlighted throughout the entire event. To turn on your closed captioning from Susan Thomas, you may click on the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you do come across technical difficulties, please do let us know in the chat box. Before we begin, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the work of Open Door Group, BC Partners in Workforce Innovation, and President's Group takes place across the province of BC and encompasses over 200 distinct Indigenous nations and cultures. Today, we are hosting the virtual fireside chat on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. I'm proud to live, work, and play here. Now, while the last time we were together for an Untapped Awards, I think it was in person, but today we'll still be able to get cozy, get comfortable, and warm. I do hope you have a cup of hot drink by your laptop or workstation, as we have an exciting lineup of speakers joining us this afternoon. We also have prizes to give away. And there are 10, yes, 10 $50 Amazon gift cards, which will be given out after the event. The requirement? Easy. Stay until the end of the event and you'll be entered into a draw to win. This is definitely an opportunity to add a few more items to your holiday shopping list. Now, before we start, I'd like to note that there is a virtual event code of conduct for this afternoon. This event does not tolerate demeaning, discriminatory, or harassing behavior or speech. This is a safe space for our panelists and participants to participate. Now, as a participant, I'd like to remind you to be mindful of your virtual surroundings and alert us if you notice someone that is violating this code of conduct. If you have any questions or would like to report an incident, I do encourage you to email info@opendoorgroup.org, which will also be entered into the chat box below. Now, let us begin our event and join me to welcome Elder Muriel Sasakamus, a member of the Kamloops Secwepemc community. Muriel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and have a wonderful afternoon. It's beautiful here. I'm 83 years old. Every day when I wake up, it's a beautiful day, no matter what the weather. I'm the daughter of Gus and Mildred Gottfredson. Grandparents are Faustine and Andy Manuel, shoe shop on my mom's side. I'm Frank Gottfredson, Okanagan. My husband Peter is a Cree from Saskatchewan. I have a son Dean and daughter-in-law Clarinda. 3 granddaughters, 4 great-granddaughters, and 1 great-grandson and 1 daughter, Rayanne. I had a lot of firsts in my life. And I'm using Indian because that's the era when all of this stuff happened. I was the first Indian girl from the Kamloops Indian Band to attend public school. And I was the first one to get a job as an operator at age 16 at BC Tel. And I was the first one from the interior to serve as an appointment to the BC Board of Parole. I was a member of the RCMP Regional Headquarters Recruitment Committee in the early 80s in Saskatchewan, and there was a 40 men and 1 me, little old me in there. I worked in polling stations in both federal and provincial elections for 61 years. I was First Nations to be elected to the Royal Inland Hospital Board. I was a BC regional member of the Native Alcohol and Drug Abuse Board. And currently I'm sitting chair of the Kamloops Canoecan Indigenous Court. It's an honor and privilege to welcome you to the unceded lands of the Kamloops Indian Band. This land was named for the 2 rivers that run through it. And to me, it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. I'm going to talk a little bit about colonization and things that affected our people. Colonization, the Indian Act, to take the Indian out of the Indian. The result of that is poverty, high incarceration rates, poor health, lack of safe drinking water, one of life's most basic needs, and the list goes on and on. The Indian Act determined every aspect of our lives, and some examples are, we got the right to vote in 1960. Before that, we were not allowed to vote in our own country. First Nations could not join the armed forces or go get an education or anything without the direct supervision of the Indian agent, and once they left the reserve, they were taken off the banned list. And despite all of this, many of our men and women went and fought in the wars. And Section 1B of the Indian Act was for women married non-Native men. They were taken off the ban, and in the same instance, the men who married non-Native women, they were put on the ban with full rights and everything that we lost. We could not own land, we could not inherit land, we couldn't do anything. There was a time in the section of the Indian Act that restricted Indian people from leaving their reserve, even to sell their goods, their whatever they did to make the means of living. They were not allowed to leave without the direct permission of the Indian agent. My parents, Gus and Millie, had me start at a very young age to be involved in many First Nations organizations that work towards making positive changes for our people. 2 examples are the North American Indian Brotherhood, started in 1945 by chiefs of the BC to spearhead the fight to obtain the right to vote. Their objective was successfully achieved in 1960 when First Nations people were finally given the right to vote. And the first election we had after that year, I worked for the Elections Canada, and we had a membership turnout voted of 99%. And the only vote that wasn't used that day was a person was in the hospital. BC Native Women's Society was founded by 6 women, my mother and myself included, in 1968. And the mandate of the society was to change and remove the Section B12 of the Indian Act for women and their children who had lost status due to marriage. We were successfully to overturn this and have Section Bill C-31 instated in 1985. It took us all those years. And in the beginning, before government funding, these organizations were self-sufficient and run by volunteers who raised funds in the community. To meet and lobby with government, they traveled to Vancouver and Ottawa on money they raised. They carpooled, packed food from home. People shared their homes with them so they could have a place to stay when traveling. And when they walked into these meetings, they looked like businessmen and women, and they were well respected by their communities and by the government officials they met. The biggest thing that happened to us that changed our lives was the Indian residential school. The residential schools work off our family systems, traditions, culture, language. Children were often taken from their families as early as age 4. When they arrived at schools, their braids were cut off, they were washed in coal oil and had their clothes destroyed. They were separated and were not allowed to look or acknowledge their siblings. Many were not allowed to go home for 2 years and then only for 1 week. which was eventually extended to 3 weeks and then 2 months. Our children suffered cruelty, starvation, hard physical labor, lack of medical care, and most of all, loneliness and lack of love. The discovery of the 215 unmarked graves here in Kamloops this past year. The secret knowledge that we all carried was finally confirmed as truth. I have a hard time to talk to this, but I'll get through it. When the announcement was made, I cried for my mom, dad, grandparents, my family, friends, members, and all the other children who were forced to attend residential schools and have carried this truth in their hearts, body, and souls for over 100 years. Thank you all, and I wish you a good and productive day, and I wish you all a Merry Christmas and good health. Thank you so much.
Prayer.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot my prayer, for heaven's sake. Excuse me. I'm not quite there, but I'm getting there. You know, like I'm 83 this year, so here's my prayer that I want to offer to you, and I hope it brings you some hope or whatever. May the good Creator give you enough happiness to keep you content, enough trials to keep you strong, enough sorrow to keep you human, enough hope to keep you happy, enough failure to keep you humble, enough success to keep you eager, enough friends to give you comfort, enough wealth to meet your needs, enough enthusiasm to look forward, enough faith to banish depression, enough determination to make each day better than yesterday, and may we in turn thank you, Creator, for your blessings. Thank you so much.
Elder Muriel, thank you so much for your opening remarks, your invaluable dedication, contribution to our country, and thank you so much for sharing this afternoon. For our next segment, we are very excited to welcome Parliamentary Secretary for Accessibility, Dan Coulter. Parliamentary Secretary was elected as the MLA for Chilliwack in 2020. He served on the rehabilitation of youth in the criminal justice system and was also a director for the Chilliwack Restorative Justice Society. Parliamentary Secretary Coulter lives in Chilliwack with his partner along with their dog, Spencer. Parliamentary Secretary Coulter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Yat, and thank you everyone for having me here today. I'd first like to begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you today from the traditional and unceded territory of the Stalo people, and in particular that of the Pullout and Chilkoyak tribes. It was great to join everyone here today and celebrate accessibility champions. I come as Parliamentary Secretary for Accessibility. I'm really passionate about accessibility, but I also, it speaks to me personally, as I've been a wheelchair user for over 20 years. And I can tell you our government is also committed to accessibility and building a barrier-free BC. So this past spring, our government introduced and passed the Accessible British Columbia Act. And before them, BC was one of the largest provinces in Canada without accessibility legislation. We modeled our legislation on what worked well in other jurisdictions and designed it to complement the Accessible Canada Act. It's enabling legislation and provides the framework for identifying, removing, and preventing barriers for folks with disabilities. And we've used a broad definition of disability to ensure anyone with a disability is captured. Barrier is also defined broadly and is not limited to physical barriers, because we know barriers can also emerge from attitudes, policies, or practices. And we have accountability measures built into the legislation. Government and prescribed organizations must produce a forward-looking accessibility plan establish an accessibility committee and a feedback mechanism. And after the Accessible British Columbia Act came into force, our first order of business was to advertise expressions of interest for the Provincial Accessibility Committee. This committee must be comprised of 11 members, of which at least half must have a disability or serve a disability-related organization. We're committed to implementing the requirements of the Act, guided by the principle "nothing about us without us," and guided by the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The committee must also have Indigenous representation and represent the diversity of British Columbians. And I expect the committee membership to be announced in the very near future. So everyone look out for that. The committee will provide advice and recommendations to government and will help develop accessibility standards. So the Act lists some standards such as employment and built environment, but that is not an exhaustive list. The committee will also prioritize the order in which the standards should be developed. We expect each standard could take at least 2 years to develop, but we will look to expedite that whenever possible. Ministry staff have also been working on identifying organizations that will also need to develop feedback mechanisms, plans, and accessibility committees. There are many organizations in BC who are already committed to accessibility. I know that many businesses already have their own accessibility committees, plans, and channels for feedback. And the legislation would allow any prescribed organization to use their existing plans, accessibility committees, or feedback mechanisms so long as they meet the requirements outlined in the legislation. So we plan to create resources such as policy guidelines, templates, and toolkits to help organizations comply with the legislation. There's a lot of work for us to do, and it'll take time for the Act to become fully implemented, but we are committed to doing it right. As Parliamentary Secretary, I have one of the best jobs for sure. One of my key roles is to ensure that the accessibility legislation is effective and well understood, and that means I get to meet all kinds of great people and learn about how different organizations and businesses are removing barriers and becoming more inclusive and accessible. Earlier this year, we were able to provide $4.8 million to Small Business BC and the President's Group to support employees to hire, rehire, or employers, sorry, to hire, rehire, and retain people with disabilities for long-term successful employment. And part of that funding was dedicated to workplace accessibility grants. Small businesses were able to apply for up to $1,000 to remove physical communication and other barriers. And I know some local businesses in my community got that grant. I know the President's Group has its pledge to measure, encouraging businesses to increase the number of people with disabilities it hires. I also appreciate the President's Group and Open Door Group for sponsoring these awards. I'm looking forward to the discussion panel later on. We can learn from each other's experiences on how best to promote accessibility and make our workplaces more inclusive. However, I'm also looking forward to a day when we no longer need to promote inclusiveness and accessibility, since we will have been successful in building a barrier-free BC. So thank you very much for having me here today, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the event.
Thank you, Parliamentary Secretary Dan Coulter, for the kind welcome and opening remarks. I think many of us are very excited to learn about the formation of the Provincial Accessibility Committee, and also the wonderful toolkits and the further implementation from this committee. Hosting an event during the pandemic can be a bit challenging, but I like to say also rewarding, as we'll soon hear from industry experts about their diversity and inclusion strategies. Events such as Untapped, the one you're part of today, is a great way to amplify the stories of employers making progress towards accessibility. As such, this event would not be made possible without our sponsors. We would also like to thank our gold sponsor, YBR, silver sponsor, Stewart Blesson Quantum Matter Institute from UBC, bronze sponsor, Community Impact Real Estate, and our impact sponsor, BiSocial. We're also pleased that two of our sponsors are joining us today. And I'd like to first welcome our bronze sponsor to the virtual platform, Steve Johnston, Executive Director from Community Impact Real Estate. Would you like to please say a few words?
Thanks so much. It's our pleasure as Community Impact Real Estate Society to sponsor this particular event. As an organization that's dedicated to creating accessibility, diversity, and inclusion in our commercial real estate space in order to afford the opportunity for not-for-profits and social enterprises to continue their work to very deserving populations, it was a natural move to support this particular event that's so focused on supporting individuals. We're really pleased that we can be here today and participate in this event with you as we collectively work to build a more just and equitable society and economy for all of our residents. So thanks again for allowing us to be here.
Thank you, Stephen. We're also very delighted that our impact sponsor, Neem O'Sullivan, Operations Manager from BiSocial, is joining us this afternoon. Neem, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here today. My name is Niamh O'Sullivan, and I'm the Operations Manager at BiSocial Canada. For those of you that are not familiar with BiSocial Canada, we are a social enterprise with the mission to advance and grow social procurement. We believe that the purchasing of goods and services are more than an economic transaction, that they are the means to build community capital, the foundation of healthy, vibrant communities. We are social procurement leaders and work with social value suppliers, all levels of government, institutions, businesses, and communities to help harness the power of purchasing with impact. If you're interested in learning more about what we do, we are hosting a diversity and inclusion purchasing power webinar on January 11th at noon. So I'll add that into the chat in a little bit.
Thank you so much, Neem, for sharing with us your organization. And thank you again for our sponsors for making this event possible. Now, I know many of you have been sipping on your hot beverages, waiting to learn more, learn from our Untapped Award winners and industry experts. You can now pair your beverage with some sugary snacks because we're going to be treated by Jamie Millard-Dixon from BC Win because she will be announcing our 5 award winners. Take it away, Jamie.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you're a hard act to follow, I tell you. Great job so far moderating. Thank you. I'm just going to pull up our screen here and shift to sharing screens. Can you all see the PowerPoint for Untapped? Awesome. I love it when technology works, which is not always the case when I'm at the helm. So hello, everyone, and good afternoon. I'm really honored to be your virtual host for the 2020 BC Workplace Inclusion Awards, and very happy to be introducing the 2020 award recipients. As you learn about just some of the amazing contributions that these individuals or business leaders have made to workforce inclusion of people with disabilities, think also of the ways that you might be able to incorporate some of their successes into your organization. So I'm pleased to announce the first award recipient. The Individual or Leadership 2020 BC Workplace Inclusion Award champion is Ash Mccloud, the leader of socially motivated and community-inspired organizations centered around food, climate, and security. Ash is with Save On Meats. Ash has led the way in creating an inclusive work environment at 43 West Hastings by prioritizing inclusive hiring, creating a culture of acceptance and openness, and by ensuring that all staff has their individual needs met at work, and organizing training for management teams by sending them to accessible employers workshops, amongst many other things. He maintains and seeks out new connections with local training and hiring agencies, and offers Save On Meats for training opportunities and practicum placements for at-youth risk and people with traditional barriers to employment. Along with operating a customer-facing counter-service dining experience, the bulk of Save On Meats' work is combating food insecurity in their neighborhood in Vancouver's downtown east side. Their daily meal program feeds 1,000 of the community's most marginalized people every day, and is focused on creating a platform of stability for recipients to allow them to overcome their own barriers to upward mobility. One of the programs that the charity runs to fundraise for these meals, Plenty of Plates, sees Save On Mood's employees educating volunteer groups and advocating for all members of the community. Through Save On Meat's work in food security, Ash has proven to be a staunch advocate for people living in Vancouver's downtown east side, many facing their own barriers to upward mobility. His tireless efforts to break biases and stigma have resulted in thousands of people being educated every year on the importance of challenging our perceptions of a community that may actively avoid doing through social connections over food, and as a result, creating advocates and allies for a marginalized group that desperately needs them. He has led the way in creating an inclusive work environment at Save On Meats, which has a 50% employment rate of people with barriers. Actually, I noticed in the recent Make It Count President's Group documentation, they're up to 71.4%. So congratulations to Ash Mccloud. Yeah. We'll have an opportunity at the end to give our thanks and wave congratulations and great big hand clapping towards the end of all of our award announcements. So thank you. Our next award, 2020 Workplace Inclusion Award, a champion for nonprofit or the public sector, goes to the City of Surrey. And I see my slides are out of order. All right, City of Surrey. The City of Surrey is the largest city by land area and second most populated in Metro Vancouver. They're a forward-thinking, globally recognized leader in building vibrant, sustainable communities. The city is one of the fastest growing diverse cities in Canada. Throughout Surrey, they offer residents improved access to recreation, fitness facilities, transportation options, public services, and green spaces. This makes each community a vital part of a truly livable modern city. To build an accessible and sustainable city where people of all abilities can comfortably live, visit, work, and play. The City of Surrey is committed to providing accessible and inclusive services, programs, and opportunities for all members of the community. The city has an inclusive hiring strategy that focuses on attracting, hiring, and promoting a diverse workforce that includes individuals with disabilities. They strive to interview and hire individuals with disabilities into existing positions within the city using a minimum of modifications. The Human Resources team works closely with disability employment agencies to ensure support throughout the hiring process and into employment. Sorry for the barking dog in the background. It's my neighbor's dog this time, not mine. They believe that inclusive hiring is important as it allows the residents of all abilities to see themselves reflected in the city, our community. The work is being recognized for their own potential of employment and community inclusion. The City of Surrey believes in creating a resilient workplace that values diverse thought and the unique skills that people with all abilities bring. Congratulations to the City of Surrey. The 2020 BC Workplace Inclusion Champion for Social Enterprise is Embers Staffing Solutions. I'm going to go back over here up to my notes. All right. With a mission to help people rediscover hope and self-sufficiency through meaningful work opportunities, the social enterprise Embers Staffing Solutions, ESS, launched in 2008. For the past 11 years, ESS has provided temporary and transitional jobs to people facing multiple barriers through low barrier employment opportunities, helping thousands of individuals transform their lives, and in turn, improve the health and safety of communities in which they reside. ESS is self-sustaining, and it invests 100% of profits back into the community through higher hourly rates, equipment, training, and workers. In 2019 alone, the organization employed over 2,000 people and put over $7.8 million in wages and benefits. Inclusion in the workplace means welcoming, respecting, and accommodating the different needs and abilities of people from diverse backgrounds, cultures, and ways of life. Thousands of individuals have been marginalized from mainstream employment due to poverty, homelessness, mental and physical health, and racial ethnic discrimination. While many have the desire, talent, and ability to work, they may require additional support and employer flexibility to successfully integrate into the workplace. People with disabilities may be able to work some days, and others requiring flexible time schedules. People starting back after addiction treatment or prison may require a gradual reentry while they deal with counseling, health, or family issues. Immigrants may need adjustments to deal with language and settlement issues. Yet in all cases, work is a transformative power that brings self-esteem, a sense of belonging, provides hope for a better future, and a way to contribute back to the community. Inclusion in the workplace is about recognizing the value of every person and creating a way for them to contribute. Congratulations to Ember's Staffing Solutions. 2020 Workplace Inclusion Champion, small business employing under 100 employees, is Gabby and Jules, homemade pies and baked goods. And oh my goodness, if you haven't tried one, they are delicious. Gabby and Jules is a bakery in Port Moody that specializes in pies and baked goodness and is inclusive of individuals of all abilities. Who hasn't heard of them? Named for their daughters, Gabriella and Juliana, they were inspired to create an inclusive workplace based on the fact that their eldest daughter, Juliana, has autism. And they saw how isolating that diagnosis can be. They opened their bakery with a mission to create a place where people could find acceptance and purpose, and therefore built inclusivity into the business from the outset. Prior to COVID, 35% of the workforce at Gabby and Jules were individuals on the autism spectrum. As they've reopened and redefined their business, they've continued to work to find ways to create meaningful employment opportunities for individuals of all abilities. By creating an inclusive workplace, they've seen firsthand of all the tremendous benefits that has to offer their business. Leading with kindness and acceptance has cultivated a great environment where all team members can feel valued for their contributions and take pride in where they work. Their philosophy when it comes to inclusion is rooted in creating meaningful employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities through various approaches, including job carving, looking at gaps in the team, and seeing potential for how they can create employment opportunities. A couple of other bakeries around Vancouver and Burnaby and Coquitlam. Cafe Divano, if ever you need to sample something delicious from Gabby and Jules also serves the Gabby and Jules products locally. Shameless plugs, I know. I believe in supporting our inclusive employers. And finally, the 2020 Workplace Inclusion Champion for medium and large business over 100 employees is Park Vancouver. Trigger happy. There we go. Pull up Park's info. Park Vancouver is Vancouver's premier entertainment destination that invites guests to step into an environment of luxury, passage, and discovery. Here, guests experience world-class dining with 8 culinary destinations, and the journey continues at the state-of-the-art casino, an award-winning casino spanning 2 floors. A sense of wonder is elevated by a 30,000 square foot, 6th-floor outdoor park, notably health and wellness services, beauty expertise at the spa by JW and the Glamoury, and a 60,000 square feet of flexible event space, including the city's largest hotel ballroom. With 2 distinct yet equally luxurious hotels, the JW Marriott and the Douglas, an autograph collection hotel, Park Vancouver meets the needs of every metropolitan adventurer. Park Vancouver acknowledges its location is on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. At Park Vancouver, they applaud trailblazers of all kinds and believe in an inclusive workplace begins with a diverse workforce. They're committed to respecting, understanding, and valuing difference. Only then can they fully foster fulfillment throughout the organization. Being located near Vancouver's downtown east side, they feel a sense of responsibility to the community to provide employment opportunities to those who may have traditional barriers to employment and may normally be overlooked. They strive to assist and find employment, setting people up for success in other areas of their lives from both hiring and procurement practices. Additionally, employing a diverse and inclusive workforce with unique and varied perspectives gives their business an advantage over competitors and creates opportunities for life-changing impacts. So congratulations to all of the 2020 recipients, like 10 seconds. You can clap, you can give a reaction, big round of clapping. You can also forward your congrats in the comments box. Congratulations to all award recipients, and I encourage everyone here to show their recognition by doing business with these organizations. Let's increase our collective impact on the success of inclusion at work. Thank you, and thank you to the organizers of this award, Open Door Group, and to all 2020 award nominees. Yeah, back over to you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. You know, this is so amazing to see our 5 award winners. It's so great to see businesses of all sizes advance accessibility. And, you know, you just got me all like, you know, excited because I was going to actually take a 5-minute break from all of this. But you know what? I think we should continue because we're on a roll. And maybe we'll hold off on refreshing or replenishing our drink by our table in about 10 minutes because I want to welcome our award winners that you just announced to the spotlight. So we have our workplace inclusion champion in the individual or leadership category, Ash Mccloud, with us. If we can spotlight him, please. We have who is the managing director from Save On Meats. In the nonprofit or public sector, Tara Cleaves from the city of Surrey, unfortunately has an emergency at home and will not be able to join us this afternoon. We also have from our social enterprise category, Kevin van de Bosch, Director of Operations from Ember Staffing Solutions. We have our winners in the small business category, Lisa Beecroft, CEO, and also Brianne Granger, Senior Team of Gabby and Jules, handmade pies and baked goods. I'm already very hungry. Winner of the medium and large business category, we have Valerie Frank Parsons, Director of Human Resources from Park Vancouver. And finally, we have an industry expert with us this afternoon, Marco Pasqua from Marco Pasqua Enterprises, joining us to round out the entire panel today. So let's get started with this. Let's get started with our first question of the day. And perhaps I'd like to start with perhaps Valerie and Lisa for this. And perhaps Valerie, you can go first. What is diversity and inclusion, and what does it mean to you and your organization?
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here today. It's great to see all of the contributions everyone's making in this space, and happy to be sharing some of the information that we're doing at Park to have a more inclusive and diverse workplace. So just generally diversity for us is having an organization where we have people with different beliefs, different backgrounds, different experiences and abilities, and creating a workplace that reflects our community. So having a big variety of people employed at our workplace. We do have about 700 employees right now post COVID. We have a few more before, but we're about 700. And so making sure we have a lot of different experiences and abilities reflected in our organization. And then inclusion would be seeking out opportunities to bring those people in, respecting what makes people different, and really highlighting that, valuing those opinions, and actually being able to implement them in the workplace, and allowing people to contribute their skills and abilities regardless of their background, and have those things valued at Park.
Thank you for that, Valerie. I do have a follow-up question to you after that, but perhaps Lisa, I would love to hear from you. What is diversity and inclusion to you, and what does it mean to you and your organization?
Thanks, Yat. And thanks for having us. And it's great to see everybody. And we really appreciate the opportunity to be able to celebrate these awards and everybody's great work in the community. So for us, as far as like diversity and inclusion, I mean, I think that, you know, kind of where we started is kind of the best place. We saw like with intention that we wanted to hire people on the autism spectrum, but what we've seen is how it has grown from there. And we really had a great opportunity this year by doing the Pledge to Measure with the President's Group, where we saw that actually 40% of our workforce self-identify as having a disability, which was quite insightful for me because of COVID, we had unfortunately lost several members of our team just with the change of our business. And so I was really looking at opportunities of how do we get back to build the diversity on our team, but we found that it had grown that way. And you know, as far as seeing the diversity and the inclusion within the team, I think that Brianne maybe can speak a little bit to her experience as far as being a senior member of the team and you know, being really a key member of our bakery team that works really closely with the folks on the spectrum and the job coaches that we've had in our space.
Yeah, hi everyone. I have found it really eye-opening and welcoming and comforting to not only be able to work with different people on the spectrum, but maybe self-identify with own disabilities that I may have not known that I have had before, and then working through them with such a great support system as well. And it's a blessing to like really be able to come into a workspace I have found where nothing is seen as negative or unwelcome, and you can feel very comforted and like you have a space to not only grow as a worker, but as like a person as well, as you're working with so many different people with so many different backgrounds. It's just been really lovely.
Thank you, Lisa and Brianne. You know, you highlighted a really important factor here is, you know, a welcoming space and feeling that there is a good support system is also very, very important. And perhaps going back to Valerie here really quickly, you mentioned earlier about being able to contribute skills and provide a feedback mechanism. Are you able to elaborate a little bit more about that, what that feedback mechanism looked like with your team? Valerie was hoping we can hear the question there. Perhaps I can rephrase here, going back to the your initial answer about feedback mechanisms within your team. If you could please let us know what that feedback mechanism looks like. And seems like you're unable to unmute, so let me try and do that for you. Give it a try now, Valerie.
Sorry about that. I was stuck on mute. Yeah, one of the things that we've really focused on, obviously with casino operations, is a little bit tricky. We have kind of lots of roles where you need specific skills, specific training to do those roles. And so one of the things we've done is worked really closely with managers to find what types of skills they're looking for. And then we've really partnered closely with our community partners. So BC Women Open Door Group, all of those organizations that are really great at this to help find the right fit for those roles. And then really working with the person once we have someone on board to make sure that we are checking in with them, that we're able to make adjustments that are needed so that they are successful in those roles. And then continuing to draw on that support from the community organizations that help bring people into the workplace, because they have lots of expertise, lots of resources that have really helped, lots of training for managers and hiring managers to help people really fit into the workplace and be able to really excel in their role once they're on board.
Thank you for that. Going back to Brianne, you know, you mentioned earlier about, you know, a really welcoming place. What is a welcoming place to you, if you can help us define that?
Oh, a place where I can come in and feel like it's okay to just be me. Like I don't have to put on a work face, where if I'm not having the best day, best mental state, then I feel the comfort of knowing that my team supports me in the decision that I need to make, whether I can be there for the day? Do I need to take a day for myself? Other resources of just like reaching out, checking in, being there on the floor, working together as a team, really supportive. I've had quite a few jobs in my day, and I can honestly say that I don't think I've found a management or an ownership or anything that's been as welcoming and as okay with different backgrounds or disabilities, and just being with you on your level and meeting you versus you coming to meet them.
Right, right. You know, Brianna, you really segue us into our next question, which really makes a lot of sense for our conversation and narrative today is, you know, perhaps 5 years ago or 10 years ago, we won't be able to have a conversation like this. Perhaps, Brianna, you may not feel comfortable even talking to your direct supervisor about a mental health a day, or taking just a day off just to recover, or, you know, just to have an open conversation. So perhaps for Marco and Ash, if I can ask both of you, and Marco first here, you know, how has workplace diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility changed in the past 5 years?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, congratulations to all the award winners. Ash, it's an honor to be speaking alongside you, my friend, and I'm so happy for you and your organization. And as a past consultant with the President's Group myself, I can tell you that that was really my first delve a couple of years back into what organizations were doing around diversity and inclusion. And I was just blown away to see the momentum that was being created there. You mentioned yet a little bit around mental health. And as a consultant with the President's Group, I was actually housed at Van City Credit Union in downtown Vancouver so that I could get the sort of the inside scoop as to how Van City was onboarding their employees with the HR department. And that was the first time in my life I was ever in an organization that not only allowed you to come up and be your full self at work, but actively promoted the fact that mental health was so important. In fact, they did it so well that I even came forward and said that I've struggled with anxiety and depression for almost 20 years as a result of the culture that they created. Now, I can tell you, 5-6 years ago, I never would have come forward and said any of that. I worked in the video game industry. It was very tight deadlines. We have to get this done. We don't know how we're going to get it done. We're just going to do it. And the diversity thing was kind of on the shelf. It's like, oh, well, you happen to be a person with a disability yourself, Marco. You use a wheelchair. That's great, but we're meeting a quota. Now we're moving from quotas to actually, you know, making this measure mean something for these organizations. And I'm so thrilled to see this pledge to measure that the President's Group has, enacted since my time with the President's Group, and that more and more organizations actually have quantifiable data to show exactly what they're doing, so that you have the good feelings for the employees, but then you also have the results to show up for the businesses. And I don't think we would have seen that 5 years ago.
Thank you, Marco. Certainly have some follow-up for you after, but Ash, if you can maybe help us answer, how has workplace diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility changed in your mindset over the past 5 years? Oh, sorry, gonna have to unmute you there. Go ahead, Ash, you can unmute yourself now.
Thank you. And come on, Marco, man, I'm trying to answer the question too here, man. You're covering all the bases. That's what's left. Of course, reinforcing what everybody had said previous. And in our experience, certainly there has been some changes. I would say our will and our desire and drive to hire people of various abilities is actually pretty much exactly the same as it was 5-10 years ago. However, our understanding and our capacity to do it has changed dramatically. And we've learned a lot, of course, like anybody doing anything. And we learned what works for us. And more importantly, we've learned what works for the people that we're hiring and what they're comfortable with. And, I think both Yat and Marco touched on the word equity. And I think before, when, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we started doing this about 10 years ago. And 5 years ago, I think is when we kind of hit our stride. We thought at first that hiring folks was enough. That was it. We're giving people an opportunity to have gainful, meaningful employment. And let's feel really good about that. And not that that's wrong. It was good that we were on the start of a road, but recognizing that we were actually on the start of that road, and hiring people was just the beginning, because equity is really the next step, and making sure that people have an equal say into the operation of the business. And it's not just, all right, well, you're here, you better fit into the job that it has, but making sure those reasonable accommodations are in line and help both your employee, but as well as the business, and find that sync. And I think we're lucky, and I'm sure a lot of other people on this call are really lucky to have found that stride. And that's when we see the real advancement, when it's not just about all of the things that we know to be true of hiring people with all sorts of abilities, but you see it in action, and you see people thriving, and then you see your business thrive because that equity actually is in sync and isn't just about feeling good. It's about progress. So that's what I've seen a lot. It changed. And because of that, our capacity to hire more people has grown with it. And frankly, for our business, it's really critical, because it's always been super important that our staff represent the people that we serve. And we serve, operating the downtown east side, a population that is disproportionately identifies as having a disability. It's just I don't think that's news or a surprise to anybody. So having our staff recognize our clients and our customers with lived experience has allowed us to answer not just as an employer, but also as a service provider. And that's what I'd say the most significant stride, that finding our pace in the last 5 years.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ash, for that. You mentioned earlier, hiring folks is not enough. So, are you able to provide some examples where you provided some job accommodations? Some concrete examples, perhaps, you were able to provide some assistive technology to a staff member. Are you able to maybe highlight high level a little bit about?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, for us, technology is not one of those things so much for us, only because we are very much a production kitchen, and the range of technology doesn't differ too much for us. With my work at the President's Group, of course, I see that there's lots of experience in offices where that can be adapted. I wouldn't call it technology, but of course, infrastructure changes here, like everybody else on this panel, where we've made just coming and going easier. But our biggest reasonable accommodations that we've had to adjust to is work pace, cycle, and scheduling, and recognizing that it is not one fits all type schedule, and people can bring a lot of value to your team without being there 40 hours a week. And that took a lot of adaptation. We have a long background in restaurants, where typically your employees are expected to work 50, if no one's listening, 60 hours a week, and meet those quotas and crank things out. And our restaurant minds were programmed to expect that of our staff. And if you couldn't keep up with that, then where's the value you bring? Is it a token hiring, or is it actually meaningful hiring? Right. And after some trial and error, lots of it, we found out without too much difficulty how to adapt our corporate culture so that someone who works those 2 shifts a week is really killing it on those 2 shifts and really bring genuine value, and not catching up or not just filling a percentage, but pulling in stride with the rest of the team. And also, beyond just the scheduling part, it also might be a much shorter shift. Someone might have the capacity to do really, really fantastic work, but they've got 4 hours. And that's where they are, and that's when you meet them where you are. Much like Brianne said, and meeting people where they are is critically important to this, and not and adjusting your mentality of this is what the expectation is.
Right. Back to really adjusting the mentality, back to you, Marco. You mentioned earlier that, initially you were perhaps, a little bit afraid to come forward, but because of the infrastructure and the inclusiveness of the workplace and the environment that you were part of, it made you feel welcome. It made you want to come forward and recognize, that did affect me much younger. So I now feel comfortable in doing so. So, what are your comments about, this potential stigma that is out there, that, hey, if you have a disability, you are perhaps labeled at some point. So, what is your comments towards that?
Yeah, well, so for my disability, it's a little bit more obvious. I have a visible disability. I'm a manual wheelchair user. So you can definitely tell when I roll into a room that I have a disability, at least from that perspective. And I think that, there are actually pros and cons to that, with regards to you are who you are and you're being very transparent by showing who you are from that regard. But I think that pile on to that with mental health, I think that because in the nature of the work that I do as an accessibility consultant and a speaker, I didn't want to come forward to talk about the mental health challenges, anxiety and depression, because I didn't want to be pigeonholed as, wait a minute, you're an inspirational speaker and yet you have anxiety and depression. How is that supposed to inspire me, right? And so there is a stigma there. However, when you create an environment and a work culture that truly is inclusive, that changes the entire mentality, and people can tell whether it's token or not. Mind me saying, I think a lot of people have a BS meter, and they can tell if an organization is just saying something to say something or if they actually are being about it. And I think that with Van City, with how they were reflecting their culture in their social media, in the events that they were involved in the organizations that they stayed involved with as partners and community partners, the proof was in the pudding. And I think that that's what made me feel more comfortable. And then going back to 5 years ago, the diversity inclusion space was just that, only talking about diversity and inclusion. But diversity means different things to different people. It could be that you're a person of color. It wasn't necessarily about having a disability. So then they add on equity to the equation, which I think is great. But I'm going to advocate for the fact that we actually literally add accessibility into the equation when you think of D&I and actually have the acronym be IDEA, because I think that that's a great idea, first and foremost. But secondly, it really puts accessibility to the forefront, and it will help to change the stigma around disability, because disability or not, everyone has something unique to bring to the table. And it's about the employer and the environment adapting to the person, not the person adapting to their environment.
That's very important. You really highlight the importance of the employer being able to provide meaningful accommodation to their staff members, to their clients, to their patrons and customers. You highlight a really great point. And you know what? There's so much more coming up, but I do know, and I've been paying, that we need to take a 5-minute break. So let's take a 5-minute break. Let's refill our whether hot chocolate or a coffee that you're having, and come back at roughly 2:02 or 2 after, and we'll have a lot more questions for our panelists. So let's take a 5-minute break right now, get cozy up, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Hear my word for the okay? I didn't even hear a single thing. Oh.
All right, everyone, we'll just give everyone about 60 more seconds here as they replenish their drinks before we return. Thank you. All right, just before I go ahead and ask the next question to our group of amazing award winners and industry experts, I'd like to continue to echo that it's very amazing to see you turn on your webcams and to see some of our participants this afternoon. And, you know, it creates a really great, vibrant opportunity for us to connect. And it does appear that we're making eye contact. And one of which I find really important is to see your faces. And because I do rely heavily on lip reading, it's really important to see your lovely, friendly faces. And thank you, and welcome back to Untapped 2021. And you might see me moving my head down and upwards here. I'm taking notes, so hope you don't mind me doing that. You know, thank you so much, Marco, Ash, Valerie, Lisa, and Brianne, for answering those first two really important questions about, you know, setting up the structure for our discussion this afternoon. And you really highlighted the importance of diversity, idea, Marco, a great term there, as well as, you know, hiring is not just to fill a quota, but also to make meaningful engagement from your staff, as per Ash, and also the importance of a feedback mechanism as described by Valerie. So moving on to our third question of the afternoon, and I'd like to pose this to both Kevin and Valerie here is, you know, we just talked about what workplace diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility changed in the past 5 years. So what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years? Perhaps, Kevin, I'll let you start first, and then Valerie, you can also answer that as well, please.
Thanks for having me here today. To be part of this group and this panel here means a lot to me, just from my own personal standpoint as well. But you know what, over the next 5-10 years, I think Marco talked a little bit about it earlier. I think that just the stigma around people with disabilities and is changing. Corporations, I know Valerie talked about, you know, Ash talked about the corporate culture, and Valerie talked about, you know, hiring people that represent the community that you're in, and I think that's going to be that message is going to continue to grow, and I think organizations are going to see the importance of that. I also do think, with obviously the pandemic that we've had right now, it's kind of forced people to kind of work from home, and businesses to look at their operations on a day-to-day basis, and how can we do things differently to include more people. And if more and more people are working from environments where they're in Marco, your case, like physically wheelchair bound, and you won't be able to get to some places, now maybe we can look at opportunities to maybe work from home or in spaces that will allow inclusivity within the organization. So I really think over the next 5-10 years, you're going to see more and more organizations you know what, adopt and adapt and hire people with diverse abilities, as I like to call it.
Kevin, just expanding on that, and Valerie, please, I'll be with you in a second here. You know, has the pandemic shown that accommodations are still pretty difficult for employers or not?
At Embers, we've been very fortunate to, you know, continue to employ people with diverse abilities, and working in the downtown east side here, not too far from Ash's business here. We know that, you know, the pandemic does not doesn't change the fact that people with disabilities need to work and need to get to accessible to different locations. So I honestly don't think the pandemic has, in our particular case, it hasn't changed, in the sense that the need is out there, and we need to continue to strive to support the people with disabilities.
Thank you. Thank you for that great answer. And Valerie, what do you project will happen in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, I think I agree with Kevin. I think it's going to just become more and more common and more standard. And maybe in the next 10 years, we'll have so many nominees for the Untapped Awards. It'll just become such a common practice. I think one of the things that you're starting to see as part of kind of employer branding is really highlighting diversity and inclusion. I just think that's going to continue. That's going to be really important to attracting and retaining top talent. And then another trend that I think is just going to continue to grow is requiring that of businesses. So when people are seeking out third-party services, if they're looking for law firms, they're looking for those types of services, they're looking for businesses that are also championing these initiatives. And I think that's going to continue to grow, and it's going to start being kind of one of the base factors people are looking at, and it's going to set you apart from competitors. Hopefully in the future it will be kind of standard. It won't set you apart from competitors, but I think over the next 5 to 10 years, that is going to be something that people are looking for when they support a business. When they're looking for services, they're going to be looking for businesses that are doing this in their workplace.
Right. So, Valerie, you're suggesting that you're going to potentially see trends shift to suggest that, if your organization is more inclusive and you value inclusive workplaces and you value your staff members, consumers are more likely to shop where you work?
Yeah, I don't know if it applies in every business. I know my husband's a lawyer, and that's one of the things when people are looking for legal services is, what are your diversity and inclusion practices? What are these things? And I think that's going to become more common for consumers in general to kind of look at these different options they have for entertainment and services, and they're going to want to gravitate towards businesses that are more inclusive, that are more creating these opportunities in the community, for sure.
Yeah, no, thank you for expanding on that. And also just expanding on Kevin's point earlier, I completely agree with you that, the pandemic has shown that accommodations aren't difficult and really benefit employers. Our recent research from the President's Group have suggested that businesses saw an economic benefit of 2 to 7 times when the cost of accommodations for employees with various disabilities. And 58% of the accommodations cost nothing at all. So it's really important to recognize that. And as well, to echo your point, Kevin, working from home, it's actually one of the most common accommodation requests. And we know it's very practical for many jobs here. Thank you, Valerie and Kevin, for that. And we'd like to kind of, segue on to our next question here is, perhaps Ash and perhaps even Kevin as well to help answer this question, and Lisa, we'll round up with you as well, is how has the pandemic affected your business and your commitment to workplace inclusion? Perhaps we'll have Ash, Lisa, and then Kevin.
Yeah, well, of course, we've all have a wide range of how the last, let's call it 2 years, have impacted our operations. For us, it's changed things dramatically. We used to operate as a full service restaurant, and we provided a meal service. Since of March of 2020, we had shut the restaurant operations down entirely, and we haven't been open to the public since. It was interesting. Thank you, Jamie, for the preamble. But some of the stuff that was mentioned in the award stuff earlier just isn't happening anymore. We have very little customer-facing operations. However, because of the stay-at-home orders and people having to isolate, we did see a shift from our typical restaurant business into our meal provision business, which scaled dramatically, and we didn't have to lay off anybody, which we're very thankful for. And we moved our restaurant employees over to the food production side if they wanted to. It was an interesting week. We did this all within a matter of 3 or 4 days.
Wow.
And yeah, we were lucky that everybody who wanted to retain the job was able to do so, albeit it might be different. And certainly it has strengthened our resolve for inclusion. And as we participated in the Accessible Employers Pledge the Measure, and via the President's Group, we actually saw our highest numbers yet. When I think that was in June of this year, which was 70% of our staff identify as having a barrier, as I think was mentioned earlier. So our resolve to continue this work has only been reinforced, and the pandemic hasn't had any effect on that resolve. What it has had is an impact on how we support people. And I'm sure everybody in this room is well-versed, probably more better versed than I am, but we actually have a mental health crisis and pandemic on the other side of this pandemic, probably happening right now. And we've seen that amongst our staff and amongst our peers, and are trying to get ahead of it as much as possible by adding things onto our benefits package, as well as things internally to support people and navigate through, I think, some rocky roads ahead. Now, that doesn't have much to do with our hiring practices, more to do with our retention practice as well as our support. Hiring, we've been pretty stable throughout this pandemic, luckily, and especially lucky because of this labor shortage, which I guess is actually an even better answer. Is one of the things that myself and my peers on the President's Group and anybody that in these conversations have preached is, on top of all of the other benefits, the retention that we've seen out of this community is worth it alone. And us being here able to have this conversation with our business being sustainable is actually a testament to 70% of those folks having barriers to employment. I mean, you see everybody in our industry and other industries literally changing their hours of operation in the days that they open because they can't find people to work.
Yeah.
And I would have no doubt that we would be exactly in that situation if a lot of our staff didn't identify as having barriers to employment, and they've been able to provide us that stability. So if anything, to answer the question, the pandemic has just bolstered our resolve to continue going down this work.
You know, you just share some real tangible examples of, you know, the commitment in your work to continue to retain talent. And it's important, even though obviously there's an untapped labor pool, you focus on your current staff and continue to bolster your benefits. Or are you able to maybe, you know, share what kind of adjustments you've made to perhaps benefits that maybe some of our employees today can learn about?
Yeah, we've always had an extended family assistance program, which covers some really sort of low-hanging counseling services, but they're good for if you're in triage or in a crisis to find out what your path to whatever the recovery of that might look like. We increased the spending amounts on that, as well as we added an entirely separate long-term counseling package. A lot of times mental health isn't captured by extended benefits. And we made sure to add that inclusion on, as well as we added an additional stipend that can be spent on anything that's not covered by your regular package. And so they have a certain budget per year that they can do for whatever they deem health related. And the definitions of that are really fast and loose. For somebody, that might be a contribution towards a gym membership. For other people, it might be paying beyond what the allowance of our existing benefits has. So maybe you've hit your cap on this service and to go beyond that. Or it could be what I say, the definition of how it's used for health is up to you to define, not us.
Right. Well, that itself, you know, even in loose term, provides an opportunity to increase their quality of life as they choose to, right? So you're giving that power back to your staff members with your benefits. So that's tremendous, Ash. And perhaps I can move along. Thank you, Ash, there to Lisa. You know, you're also in the food and beverage industry here in retail and service, sorry. How has the pandemic affected your business and your commitment to workplace inclusion?
We and I were joking that we could just say ditto to a lot of what Ash just said. And he said it much more articulately than I will probably. But, you know, unfortunately, one thing that did differ is that at the beginning of the pandemic, we unfortunately had to lay off all but one of our employees. So we went from 71 down to one employee, which was a particularly brutal day. We had to shut down our cafes for about a month. And as far as the bakery here, we just weren't sure how to restructure, what to do. And so luckily we were able to hire pretty much everyone back, with a few notable exceptions. That unfortunately what happened is because we had to eliminate the cafe seating that we had at the bakery prior to COVID. And so there were some employees that their role was tied to that as far as busing and things like that. So we were able to, it was actually, I mean, from a business perspective, it was a unique opportunity to be able to push pause and kind of rebuild from ground up, which was kind of a very empowering opportunity for us. And we were able to really find some strengths within our teams in ways that we didn't see before. But much like Ash was mentioning, what we found, a couple things in terms of the retention, not just with the folks for us that had disabilities. I find that in general, like we had everyone came back and everyone stayed. Like it was the weirdest thing. I mean, Ash, you could speak to what it's like in this industry, typically with turnover. We had no turnover for a year and a half, which was a bizarre state to be in. We didn't have to hire. We were, in the most solid ground we'd ever been in as far as staff. And, and what we found since then, where, once we kind of come out, people are moving on as far as school and things like that. People are really seeking us out as an employer because of our inclusive practices. It's really cool to see this generation. They do so much research as far as where they want to work. And this is more often than not, that's what is mentioned. So that people are like, I've heard about what you guys do. I've like, they, a lot of times it's friends of people that work here that end up applying. And so it really has strengthened our team that way, because it's people that really are like-minded. And so they kind of are, again, very diverse, I would say our team is, but they are very kind of connect to that idea about inclusion. And, the other point that Ash made, I think, is like, we can't talk about it enough. I mean, certainly at the Presence Group table, it's spoken about at length, but just the mental health needs. I mean, that's something that we're working on. How do we support our team as much as possible? And part of that is about being open about it. Like, Bree mentioned earlier, it's like, it's just being honest. And it's like, they're taking away the stigma. It's like, if you're just struggling, let's talk. If you don't want to talk, like, what can we do to support you? If you need a day, you need a few days, what do you need? And it's just trying to just make people feel comfortable with knowing that it is a safe space, that it doesn't like put their job in jeopardy. It doesn't change the way that we view their contributions to the team. They are valued as much as everybody else. And it's just, I think that, and hopefully that is how, Bree can speak to as far as from her perspective, if that's, given that safe space and that focus on
yeah. No, that's great. Lisa, you just gave a real, again, both you and Ash, real tangible examples of the nature of what the pandemic has contributed, forcing us to pivot very much, temporary layoffs to retention. But perhaps, Bree, I can maybe ask you a question is, what were the emotions that you felt, in as well as, the importance of being able to come back and also, be in a welcoming, inclusive environment. What did that mean to you, Brianne?
Well, so many emotions. When I was first I was one of the many people laid off. I didn't take it as anything negative. Like, you can see the way the world was going, how things were like winding up, and I left with just pure intention of, I just hope that I can come back and there's a place to come back to. And I know that within a month, I was asked back and I was like, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. Because at the time you're thinking, am I going to get a job like at my old place? Am I even going to be able to get a job anywhere else in this city where I'm living? Do I need to relocate? Am I able to relocate? There's so much going on when you just don't know. And to come back to a place that felt like home and like I knew what was going on, there was a major curve though coming back in, because it was completely different from where we started. We changed our production. We were running only a certain type of product every single day because that was in demand and that's what kept us going. And I just jumped in both feet, just ready for anything. And it was a beautiful thing to watch. Like every couple weeks after that, it was like another person, another familiar face, and everyone started to come back as much as, they could. And it was so cool because it was the family kind of coming back together, but then we were all readjusting to everything that was going on. So we were all trying to deal with what was going on at work, but then of course we all have our own personal things going on in our own homes. And so managing that, it felt nice to be able to, if I was a mess at home, I'm okay at work. And if it was a little bit messy at work, I can go back home. So it didn't feel off kilter or uneven, but I felt like either way I was supported, and I had a great team that I could talk to and just like realize that I'm not the only one going through this. And there are other people there that not only can support me, but I can help too, because that kind of, as you're working through with other people, you're realizing I can relate to this as well, whether it's a completely different situation, looking at it from different views. But you can always learn something from other people when you like step outside of yourself.
It's so important, you demonstrate that ability to pivot, but also your leadership within Gabby and Jules, to be able to share your learnings very in such, raw ways, which is very, very thankful. And thank you for sharing your journey just now, Brianne. It's very powerful, very raw. Maybe I can turn it to Kevin. Obviously, Embers, much of your work, is changing lives through the power of work and, offering, economic employment opportunities through your key programs. How have you felt the pandemic affected your business and commitment to workplace inclusion?
Yeah, the beginning of 2020 was very scary because over 95% of our workers either face barriers or have a disability. And like Jamie mentioned at the beginning of this segment, we put out over 2,000 workers in 2019, and we didn't know what would happen in the construction industry. So most of our workers were in construction, and we really didn't know what was happening in construction. So what the pandemic actually did, it actually forced us to diversify a little bit. And we went, well, what does everybody do when they go home? They buy things online, they're on home. So our biggest client, or our biggest partner right now, I will absolutely call them a partner, is Purolator. Their warehouses blew up, and they needed the support that we had. So we were able to take a lot of anybody that was displaced, but not only did the construction industry actually kind of survive the pandemic here in BC specifically, we were able to include a lot more people. So our 2020 year was actually our best year ever, because we were able to not only save the jobs for the people that were already existing in the construction industry, but because it did force us to look at diversify kind of our customer portfolio and our partnerships that we have, and it allowed us to get a lot more workers out. So we will put out in 2021 probably close to 1,000 different workers alone to Purolator across the country this year. So it did force us to change a lot.
You mentioned the importance of being able to diversify, and you mentioned the importance of pivoting. Valerie, how has Park been able to navigate through this in the hospitality industry?
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting experience. Not sure if everyone's aware, casinos actually were closed for a full 16 months. We closed in March 2020 and we reopened in July 2021. And luckily, a lot of our casino focused positions, we were able to recall those people. So a lot of the same people we had working with us prior to COVID are still with us. But where I would say we have the biggest change is in some of the departments where we had more transferable skills, where people could go to other industries and work during the closure. We had a lot of turnover in those areas. So one of the big things that we're dealing with right now is a lot of new people on our HR team. So working with those people to now build the relationships again that we've had previously in our talent acquisition role, reaching out to those partners, finding out, what opportunities are out there. I would say our commitment to workplace inclusion hasn't changed at all. We're back up and running. We're looking for those opportunities, but it's more building back those relationships and getting those lines of communication open again to make sure that we're not missing out on any of those opportunities.
Thank you. Obviously, building back that relationship is really important, and tapping into that pool is crucial to any and every business. Perhaps Marco, as a speaker, of course, how has the pandemic affected your business? And maybe expand on that a little bit.
100%. So I'll be completely honest and transparent. Within the first basically week of finding out about COVID, companies were being very cautious. And as a speaker that travels the country, I wasn't able to do that. So I'll tell everyone here, over $30,000 worth of work that I expected coming up was immediately canceled overnight. So my family was pretty devastated, and I have a young child as well. My daughter's 8 months old, and she wasn't with us quite yet, but my wife was pregnant. So there was a lot of things going in my mind. But if there's anything that's taught me about being born with a disability, it's about adaptability. And I've literally been bred to be an entrepreneur simply by being somebody with a disability, because you have to be able to navigate the ups and downs. And so immediately I went out, I bought a studio microphone, I upgraded my at-home connection system and all those things. And I thought to myself, instead of looking at this as a negative, where are the silver linings or the positive? It means now that I can be instantaneously anywhere in the world at any time from the push of a button to be a speaker. And as a guy who's super high energy and loves feeding off of audiences, it was really tough for me at first when you don't really get a lot of audience feedback. But as you adapt and you change, you see that there's other methodologies that will work. And people with disabilities have been begging for remote work for decades now. So it only took a worldwide pandemic to make that happen. Now, having said that, it's incredible. October, November, and December of this year has been my most profitable month in the 10 years that I've been running my business.
Wow.
So it's incredible. And in fact, December 3rd is International Day of Persons with Disabilities, as you know, and I literally am doing 3 back-to-back presentations just in the morning. That wouldn't be possible if it wasn't virtual, because I'm able to click and go to the next one and go to the next one and the next one. So there's a lot of benefits here. And I think that, remember to recognize the person behind who you're staffing, recognize their strengths and their abilities. And no matter what somebody identifies with, just remember to treat people like people, and they will bring their best self to work in whatever capacity, virtual or otherwise.
I can already feel the energy here, Marco, and I can hear your voice coming through to my Bluetooth hearing device straight to my mind. So, you're feeding off, and I'm trying to feed off your energy here. Very high level energy. Love this fireside chat. And thank you to Jennifer Doe's screen share there. We're keeping warm with our hot beverages. And just want to remind our guests here today that we will have a question and answer period for you to ask questions for our panelists today. And maybe Marco, going back to you real quickly, you mentioned earlier about, silver lining, focus on the silver lining and focusing on a positive, maybe going out to purchase some devices or tech to support the virtual meetings and being able to have meetings internationally at a dime, for example. But, do you have any advice for others who want to set off in a similar direction?
Yeah, just don't make assumptions that it's going to be harder than it actually is. There is grant programs like the ones that were offered by the President's Group initially, but there are other programs that you can get involved. Be creative, make community partners that are experts in their field and know some of that untapped talent sources that you may not be aware of, but those experts and organizations are aware of them. So those community partners will be able to bring in that new era of employees for you. And just by all means, just get started. It's really important for anyone just to stop making excuses and just say, look, if I'm a small business, medium-sized business, or otherwise, and we want to make sure that we're one of the companies that's there for the next 10 years, we have to do things a little bit differently. And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Let's not make more excuses here. So Valerie, at Park, what do you think has helped Park Vancouver really get to where you are in the current DEI landscape, and kind of also what advice you have for other employers who want to set off in a similar direction?
Yeah, we were actually maybe a unique entry into this space in that we actually had some requirements put on us by the City of Vancouver during our development phase. So when the casino was approved to be relocated, it was Edgewater Casino, and then when Park Vancouver was being built, there were certain requirements put on us by the city, and so there was inclusive employment requirements as well as local procurement requirements, and so that was kind of the starting point for us to really focus on this, and then it really just grew into part of our normal culture. And, we were able to far exceed what the minimums were put on us by the City of Vancouver, and we continue to try to improve those numbers all of the time. And one of the things, like I mentioned, again, the community partners, the resources that are available, that's what's been really helpful to us, from kind of finding the right talent for the team. And then we've had, Jamie specifically helping us with people who, once they're in the workplace, if we've run into some challenges or things that are unique that we haven't encountered before, there's been a lot of support there. So I'd really recommend, if someone's looking to expand their work in this area, is to really find those resources and use them and ask questions and see what types of supports are out there. The other thing that we try to do a lot is provide training to our hiring managers and to our managers who are going to be managing people directly. It's kind of when it's easy for HR or your talent people to say, oh, inclusivity and have a diverse workforce, but without the tools for the managers who are directly working with those employees, it can be a bit of a challenge, or there can be a bit of a gap there. So we're always looking for those opportunities to bring in training. We've done mental health first aid training. We've done Aboriginal training on things that community experiences. So we're always looking for those opportunities. And like was mentioned before, some of this is completely free, or there's grants for these organizations that provide it. So we have done a lot of this without really incurring cost to Park. So we've been able to provide a lot of value by relying on those community partners.
Thank you. It's important to rely on community, partners. And maybe Ash, maybe you can tell a story here as, what has helped you and the Better Life Foundation and Save on Meats to get to where you are, and also your advice on you have for others who want to set off in a similar direction. Oops, might have to unmute you there. There you go.
Thank you. Certainly want to echo what everybody else said. And I think Marco most recently said is tapping into the community of leaders that can help you navigate this. If we were trying to stick to traditional recruitment methods to hit our goals, we just simply would have not have got here at all. But because we used organizations like Amber's, thanks so much for all of the help that both Amber's and Downtown Eastside Works has contributed, as well as Open Door, and a long list of organizations that we've worked with, the BC Autism Family Network Association and YMCA are also ones that we've used frequently to really just help. I mean, they have the network. They spend all of their time trying to place people that help fill these positions that we really desperately require people in. And not just that, of course, they help with the training and the recruitment and the onboarding, as well as all of the other processes that come through after. The continual support after is something you just don't get from traditional recruitment. Usually you hire somebody, they come in, and then that's it. You're left to your own devices. Having employees of any sort of history or background come with someone that can support you in their hiring process is just an incredible incentive to any employer, I would say. And the resources that they come from, not just training, but continual support, as well as even like interpreting your onboarding procedure and figuring out how it works for their clients. As I say, we wouldn't be able to hit these targets without the help of those agencies, and they're there. So I would recommend that anybody utilizes them. I generally did not mean to have this pun, but I caught it before I said it. It's an untapped resource.
That's a really good one. I'm gonna have to
write that
down here. Well, Ash is really good with puns here, so definitely we need to get into the untapped talent here. I agree. With that in mind, there's also stigmas. I want to focus really on this for my last question, and this is towards Marco and Kevin here. We often hear stigmas around hiring people with disabilities, and that accommodations cost a lot of money, and it requires resources from the organization. Marco, what's your reaction to this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm very familiar with the President's Group resources, so I could give the boilerplate answer of most resources only cost $500 or less. But really what we've talked about before is about flexibility. I think flexibility is the biggest resource that any employer can offer, and it doesn't cost anything. Just the understanding of changing your attitude a little bit and knowing that there is infrastructure in place to make it happen. I know that with the President's Group, a lot of the consultants, even before you yet, they were able to work remotely from various locations across the province and still get that work done. And it's simply because we're able to meet people where we're at. So to sort of reiterate what's already been said at today's event, I think that employers to understand that it doesn't cost a lot of money. You just need to be able to have the know-how, a great place to find the know-how and to find resources. The whole reason why we created accessibleemployers.ca was to provide resources for free to any employer so that there was no stigma or excuses. And we painstakingly interviewed every single member of the President's Group who were change leaders and best practice leaders in their industries to find out exactly what they could do to make that impact and difference. And now that we're seeing that spread across the province, the country, and the world, I think that more and more places are going to be remembering this time in our life as not necessarily just the down moments that we've had as a result of the pandemic, but the aha moments that we've had as a result of trying things differently and working together and showing our resolve as humanity is concerned. And I think that that's really helped to remove the stigmas too.
Yeah, you mentioned flexibility. Is that the same for you, Kevin?
Yeah, no, 100%. Flexibility is huge, but I just wanted to share a quick story. Like back in 2010, I opened the Home Depot in Chilliwack, and we needed 110 people, and we rented out the arena there and interviewed 1,100 people in 3 days. And it wasn't until then I realized what Valerie made a point of is how important it was to hire people that represented your community. And I partnered with CSCL, with the Chilliwack Society for Community Living there. And it wasn't until I was in the direct position of hiring and I had influence on who I could hire that I realized how important it was to hire people with diversity. And the community organization, I think Ash mentioned, is like they come with supports. Like so as the organization, sure, I was in a very big organization at that time, and we were able to make flexibilities, make accommodations, be flexible with the workers. But I think it was the supports that CSCL and organizations like that give. Literally one-on-one, they were standing beside some of our workers with disabilities until they were comfortable enough in their role. And that support, unless you talk about it, a lot of employers don't necessarily realize. So I think when it comes to, the stigma around hiring people with disabilities and the costs associated with it, I would say that there isn't any additional costs associated with it if you really understand what the support systems are involved and kind of the stigma around it as well. It's like, I really think that when hiring people with disabilities, I can tell you right now, the turnover it's not there. You've got committed, dedicated workers. And for an organization, from a long-term standpoint, you are going to realize some benefits there as well. So I would say there isn't any cost, additional cost. Understand what the resources are in your communities, and then really champion it. I would say for employers, really champion it. We won or one of our workers won the WOW Award. Widening, I'm not sure. Dan might be able to mention say what that is about, but I forgot at this time, but that was back in 2011 or 12. But it was really good. It's very empowering, and it's very, it means a lot to me to be able to hire people with different abilities.
Partnering with grassroots communities is very important, as you mentioned, Kevin, in your tangible story. Likewise, Val, maybe Valerie, I want to come back to you, and maybe you can expand a little bit on this as well. May have to unmute you there. There you go. Go for it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think kind of to Kevin's point about the engagement and the value in showing and the employer is supportive of accommodating people. I think it helps with people with disabilities and different backgrounds, but I think it also helps in general with the workforce seeing that the employer cares, and I think it does help with retention. And then the other thing I would say is, in some ways, not kind of seeking out diversity for the sake of diversity, like still looking for people who are the right fit for the roles. And in a lot of times there won't be a lot of cost associated for that because you're pairing the right people with the skill set and the background that you need for that role. Sometimes you need to be a little bit creative, but I do think it does create more engagement and more appreciation, and people feel valued where they know that they can need some adjustments to their role or to their workspace, and that they are going to be supported in that through their employer.
Thank you, Valerie. And, it's really important as we progress through this stage that we continue to advocate for one another to provide an inclusive and safe space. I want to thank Ash, Marco, Lisa, and Brianne, Kevin, and Valerie for being part of a very important conversation this afternoon. I would like to open this safe space to our participants for the next 10-15 minutes to have a question and answer period. And if you have a question, I encourage you to either enter it on the chat or do the wave on your Zoom, and we'll be able to present these questions to our panelists. So let's open the floor up, and I think Jennifer, our very friendly tech coordinator here this afternoon, will be able to assist us with that. So as we wait for a few questions here, we have included into this chat a couple of links to learn more about some of the community benefits agreement, for example, from Vancouver, which Valerie was a part of from Park of Vancouver, and as well as other initiatives, which includes the Small Business of BC, which has their workplace assistive tech agreement and grant as well. So like what Marco has mentioned earlier, it is a very important accessible resources. Jennifer is saying that the questions will be coming directly to me, so look forward to seeing them on my chat. But real quickly here, the Workplace Accessibility Grant from Small Business BC. The grant can be used for environments, attitudes, practices, policies, technology. So it is very meaningful. All right, let's see, we have questions here. Perhaps here's a question here from a guest here. It's talking, here we go, let me see. Okay, here it is. So this is for Marco here. 1 in 5 Canadians identify with a disability, and it's also very likely that some of our attendees today self-identify or work with someone with an invisible or physical disability. What kind of suggestions and tips for organizations that have not embarked on this accessibility and inclusion journey?
Wow. Yeah, no, absolutely. And, the statistic of 1 in 5 is absolutely true, particularly including those with invisible disabilities and the aging population as well, who still many of whom want to work. I think that if there's an organization who's really interested in learning the next steps of what to do, I'm going to give a selfless plug to the President's Group again. Join the community of accessible employers. It's absolutely free to join that group, and you instantly then have access to these lovely people here at the event today as a community to talk about the various resources that are there and to communicate to, at special events like this one here today, and really know that you're not alone in the journey and that it's okay to be starting out right out the gate. That, you don't necessarily need to have all the answers right away. I think that that's really important because a lot of organizations think that they have to be an expert, so they don't want to expose themselves by being so uneducated when it comes to supporting people with disabilities. The second thing I would say is within your organization, we all know that you can't in interview processes say, hey, I noticed that you have a little bit of a limp there. Do you have a disability? Have you had a surgery that I should be aware of? But you can ask individuals, what are some best ways that we can support you in our organization that will help you lead to success? In that phrase, I didn't use the word disability once, but you're showcasing and you're setting the tone from the top that it matters to you that your organization adapts to everybody's needs. And make sure that people know that it's an open door policy. So although you may be new on your journey, for them to know that it's an open door policy for you to be able to come over, knock on the door and say, hey, listen, in previous workplaces, I didn't really talk about my particular needs, but it would be super great if I could have an adjustable height desk for this reason, or adjustable task lighting, or if you'd allow me to work from home 2 days a week as we're starting to go back into a hybrid office. Don't be bashful about your needs, and employers, be opening to listen to those needs. I think that if we can meet each other in the middle, then no matter where you are on your journey, you're going to find the ways to adapt and to ultimately improve your business and where it's at today.
Thank you, Marco. Very meaningful, very important here as we continue this narrative here. I have another question from the audience here. As an entrepreneur leading a consulting group, for example, non-employees, how can I, as a consultancy, be more inclusive? Perhaps Marco, you might be a better fit to answer this question here.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll be completely honest. I am a solopreneur. So I'm everything. I'm my accountant. I am my speaker. I am my everything. But what I can say is, honestly, showcase the fact that what it is that is important to you is reflected in the type of materials and communications that you do. So if you are releasing videos on social media or on your website, take the time to have them captioned, for example. Have the captioning hard-coded so that there's no way to toggle it on or off, that it's actually embedded in the videos and your marketing materials. Find local businesses that could potentially braille your cards, or even provide your materials in alternative formats such as large print, so that you are meeting your customers where their needs are at. And ultimately, I think that that's a good way to get started. And if you're proud of being an employer that, even if you are a solopreneur, talk about it. Talk about it with everyone you speak about. Talk with your friends, your family. Let them know that you're really looking for ways to expand your understanding of how you can be more inclusive, and that even as a solopreneur, you're going to look with third-party vendors. I've worked with a lot of graphics designers where if I don't have a time to do a particular project, I'll hire somebody with a disability who has the skills and the time to do something else. So it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. And I think if you do that in combination with delegation, the sky's the limit, no matter how small or large your business is.
Working smarter is certainly very important. And I love the fact that the sky is the limit. A question for you, Lisa, here. What can small business do to influence their peers and other small businesses to make the pledge to measure disability?
Well, I think that what we've tried to do is just talk about our experience and to try to really just plant the seed and the idea in fellow small businesses in our community. And for me, I try to make myself very accessible for any other small business that wants to embark on this journey, and they can reach out. And I've chatted with many and shared our wins and certainly all the mistakes we have made and we continue to learn from. And so I think that just being open about what we're trying to do and how we continue on this journey, and again, hopefully inspire some other businesses to kind of look inwards and look for opportunity, and hopefully set that intention. I want to see more of that in our community, and just be part of that dialogue. And again, hopefully a resource if possible, if needed.
No, thank you. I have questions here for Kevin and Valerie before we wrap up for closing remarks here. For Kevin, what can small business do to tap into the diverse source of talent we've been talking about today?
I think it's just similar to what Lisa was just saying. Well, there's a couple things. First of all, talk about it if that's the culture that you want to, the corporate culture that you kind of want to build into. Find out the community resources in terms of who's there in your local communities and how they can support. I talked a little bit about it not being a burden when it comes to cost to the organization or to the small business. So really short story here. We had a guy in Chilliwack, his name was Justin, but he worked for decades coffee shop as well. And he started in the back, just washing dishes. And And when I came in from Home Depot that I was at, and he came out and served me coffee. He was such a proud, and what a story. And it gives me goosebumps every time I talk about Justin, because what a wonderful individual. So it's really embracing the corporate culture, or the small business culture that you want to have, and finding the local resources that can support you in that journey.
Mhm. Thank you for expanding on that. And Valerie, a question for you. And this question, I think, is more tailored towards Ash, but perhaps you can be able to tackle this as well. Is, there was mention that scheduling is very important. For example, 4-hour shifts or shorter. Has groups made inroads with unions to increase the flexibility in the workplace?
Yeah, we might we might be lucky in some ways, because we did have the requirements on us from the city of Vancouver, and so that played into negotiations with our union. We do have language in our collective agreement about inclusive employment and some adjustments that need to be made. Ultimately, unions are involved in the accommodation process anyway, if you have someone who has a disability or some other kind of accommodation. And so we haven't ran into too many issues with that. Scheduling obviously on seniority basis and that kind of thing can be a little bit tricky, but luckily we haven't had challenges with our union on making things work where we've needed to make those adjustments in the workplace. So I think it's going to vary business to business, probably depending on your relationship with your union, but so we've been quite lucky that we've had that language, and we haven't had very much conflict on it. The union's obviously very understanding about wanting to make those employment relationships work as well. And ultimately, these people will become their members. So.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Thank you once again to Marco, Lisa, and Brianne, Kevin, Valerie, and Ash, who had to hop off here. And for all of you for attending. And before we wrap up, it's important that we welcome Alona Percy from Open Door Group, the incoming Chief Executive Officer at the Open Door Group, for our closing remarks. Alona, the floor is yours.
Thanks. That was quite an attempt at my last name, but I know it's a difficult one. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes. So as Yet said, my name's Alona Pusa. I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer at Open Door Group, and I'm the incoming CEO in March, as our 27-year CEO, Tom Burnell, has announced his retirement yesterday. So thank you so much for the warm welcome, and I know this is awkward virtually, but a massive round of applause for you moderating this panel so well. It's not just the work that you've done today, but the work that you and your team do with the President's Group, and in terms of advancing inclusive workplaces here in BC, it's really impactful. So thank you for that. I myself, I'm calling in from the ancestral and unceded homelands of the Hunker-Minam and Squamish-speaking people, known by its colonial name as Burnaby. And I think it's just so amazing that despite everything, a pandemic, floods, and so on, we can still gather to push ourselves to be better, to be better and to learn how we can be more inclusive. Open Door Group is an organization since 1976. It's what we do. We've been serving and supporting people with disabilities to prepare for, to find, and to keep employment. And we have always operated and still do on the fundamental belief that all individuals have the right and have the ability to succeed. So, I've been thinking about this and really changing the way that we look at the world, and really re-examining what inclusion means. And that theme has come up a few times today, and just how much inclusion benefits our workplaces, benefits our communities, benefits our societies. It's something that I think requires constant, intentional examination. I think it requires us to be very honest and to be brave about really changing the way that we do things. So, I think that by attending today, the panelists, as a participant, listening with open ears, you've really shown up. So I thank you for that. And I just want to take a couple of minutes to do some specific thank yous. I know she's not here anymore, but I really want to express our gratitude to Elder Muriel Saskamoose for her welcoming today. And thank you to Parliamentary Secretary Dan Coulter for your opening remarks and all the work that you're doing and your team is doing to change the landscape around accessibility. It's just so welcomed. the President's Group and BC Win, Jamie, for introducing all of the award winners. It's been and it continues to be such a pleasure to work with all of you. All of the panelists and the speakers, thanks for sharing your experience and not being afraid to get uncomfortable. And to Tanya Creed, Tanis Campbell, and Susan Thomas for providing ASL language and caption services at this event. Thank you for that. And as well, I'd really like to give a shout out to the communications team at Open Door Group, Liz, Jen, and Camilla, for all of your efforts on organizing this event. I truly believe that British Columbia as a province, our greatest strength really is the diversity of people. And that is why Open Door Group created the Untapped Awards, to really celebrate individuals and businesses who are demonstrating a strong commitment to inclusion. It was mentioned tonight, labor shortages, they're here, and workplaces and what work means and career paths and so on, that's evolving, it's completely changed. Demographics are shifting, an increased number of people with disabilities. So we're really at a critical point, and there's such amazing opportunity right in front of us. So I do encourage you to continue the conversation, reach out to each other, continue to discuss and engage, and hopefully people are leaving with a bit of a wider perspective of what inclusion means, what accessibility means, what equity means, and so on. So with that, I thank you again, and I ask you to keep an eye open. You will be receiving a save the date for the Untapped 2022, hopefully in person for September 2022. But on that note, thank you so much for attending and sharing.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. See you next year.